So we're live, so everybody can watch us if you want. Good evening. My name is Craig Clark, and I'm the Executive Director of the Allegheny County IDA. In connection with the project, which is the subject of this public hearing, it's the McCormick, New York, NY, CSG LLC in the village and town of Andover, Allegheny County. It's April 8th, 2025, and it's 5:30. Today I'm holding this public hearing to allow citizens to make a statement for the record relating to the involvement of the agency, which is with this proposed project for the benefit of McCormick, NY, CSG LLC, a Delaware limited liability company. The proposed project consists of the following: the acquisition of an interest in an approximately 22-acre portion of an approximately 141.3 acre parcel of land located on Chestnut Street, tax map number 21618-1-1 and 1302 Chestnut Street in the village and town of Andover, Allegheny County. Together with an existing approximately 5 megawatt AC solar energy generating facility, includes panel racking, inverters, electrical cables, grid interconnection, site preparation and access roads, and related fixtures, machinery, equipment, and tangible personal property. All the foregoing constituting a solar energy generating facility owned and operated by the company. The granting of certain financial assistance with respect to the foregoing include potential exemptions from certain sales and use taxes, real property taxes, real estate taxes, transfer taxes, and mortgage recording taxes. The lease with an obligation or sale of the project facility to the company or such person as may be designated by the company and agreed upon by the agency. Tend to provide general information on the agency's general authority and public purpose to provide assistance in these proposed projects. I'll then open the comment period to receive comments from all present who wish to comment on either the proposed project or the financial assistance contemplated by the agency. However, before discussing the general information and opening the hearing for public comments, I'd like to first some details of the financial assistance as outlined in the application. The estimated value of tax exemptions would be $2,100,000 in property tax exemptions over the proposed 20 years. Provisions of Chapter 1030 of Laws of 1969 of New York State, constituting Title I of Article 18A, the General Municipal Law, Chapter 24 of the Consolidated Laws of New York amended, and Chapter 99 of the 1973 laws of the state of New York is amended and modified by Section 906A of said general municipal law, authorize agencies to promote, develop, encourage, and assist in acquiring, constructing, reconstructing, improving, maintaining, equipping, and furnishing of manufacturing, warehousing, research, commercial, and industrial facilities, among others. Pursuant to Section 859A of the General Municipal Law, State of New York, the Act, prior to the agency providing any financial assistance of over $100,000, a public hearing is held in pursuant to Section 859A of the Act with respect to said project. And since it is, as we mentioned, the proposed financial assistance provided by the agency may exceed $100,000, then prior to doing any financial assistance, we have to hold this public hearing. After consideration of the application received by the company, the members of the agency adopted a resolution on March 13th, 2025, authorizing the executive director of the agency to conduct this public hearing with respect to the proposed project. The executive director of the agency caused notice of the public hearing to be mailed on March 27th of 2025 to the chief executive officer of Allegheny County, the village and town of Andover, and the Andover Central School District. Published on March 28, 2025 in the Spectator, a newspaper of circulation available in the residence of village and town of Andover, Allegheny County, New York, and corrected notice of public hearing was mailed March 31st, 2024 to the chief executive officers in the county, the village, and town of Andover. And the corrected notice of public hearing was published on April 4th, 2025 in the Spectator. And we also posted this on our website and the Andover Town and Village websites. Copies of notice hearing are available on the table if you haven't seen that. And now, unless there's objection, I would not like to read this again. Is that okay? This is what I actually read you already, so. The comments received at this public hearing will be presented at the members of the agency at or prior to the meeting in which the members of the agency will consider whether to approve the undertaking of the proposed project by the agency. Written comments. The notice of the public hearing indicated that written comments could be addressed to Craig R. Clark, an executive director of the agency. The following was asked by Mark Sisson, Andover School Board President, in email in preparation for the April 8th public hearing. I hope that you can answer the following questions, of which I did. Where we see acquisition of interest, does this mean that the IDA is considering purchasing the McCormick project, land and equipment and all? If so, then the project is leased to the energy company as an example. Would any generated revenue subsequently be paid to the county, in turn result in tax payments being reimbursed to local school district, town, and village government? Any power generated and benefits go to the developer, is my answer. To be able to help and offer financial assistance, the IDA has to have a lease-back option. We only take nominal title. Further clarification is the McCormick LLC is owned by the developer who will speak tonight. Acquisition, tax help. I read this mean if two tax help were chosen, then McCormick LLC would keep ownership in the project and make small pilot payments of $2,500 annually. It's per megawatt, split between the town and village, and be exempt from town and county and school taxes. So if this is the case, should the project generate revenue, would that be monitored and proportionally? Avoid any pilot agreements. If the IDA, it's my answer, if the IDA board approves financial assistance, our standard pilot is $2,500 per megawatt on equipment only. Whatever portion is only in the town, the sharing is between the county, school, and town based on their tax rates. The portion in the village is sharing the pilot between the village, town, and county, and school, again based on their tax rates. In both cases, it's for equipment only, and the land still pays full property taxes. So the pilot is not on the land. The proposal of assistance to financially aid the company, McCormick LLC. This being said, I also understand the assistance from the IDA would be for a purpose of promoting economic growth, developing sound commerce, job creation, attracting new businesses, etc. Can you explain how the project will help growth in economic areas? Solar projects, my answer is different, and IDAs are encouraged to assist these projects to generate clean energy. Landowners benefit from leases, and indirectly growth can be supported by clean energy production. Once the public hearing is completed, the IDA then will make a decision internally, or will the taxpayers have a vote in the decision? We, the IDA, have a public hearing meeting on April 10th. It is broadcast live, and we'll review, and that was my answer. It has now been changed to May 8th due to the possible change to a 25-year pilot and deviation later to be considered April 10th. Once a determination of the financial assistance is made, will there be a report accounting for the potential loss of tax revenue expensee for the town, village, and school district? The IDA reports annually on all benefits received due to the exemption on the equipment through the pilot, and the pilot said paid or noted the landowners still pay full property taxes on the land itself and lose any ag exemptions. Last question. As you would expect, there's a lot of talk and misunderstanding going around the Andover community with regards to the IDA's upcoming hearing. Hopefully these answers and these questions will help many to understand the goals and outcome of overall complexity of the projects. My answer, I hope this helps. No decrease in property taxes on land, and usually a small increase due to losing ag exemption, and a small increase to the taxing authorities due to the pilot on the equipment. And I said, call if any other questions, and we did talk on the phone, and I explained all those answers. So hopefully that'll answer some of the questions that you may ask tonight. Basically, the pilot is on the equipment only. The land pays full taxes, so there is no loss of any property taxes to the town, village, or the school district, and that's the same on all solar projects. Next, remarks by the company. I will now introduce who is speaking again.
He'll be Dr. Clark.
Okay, from the company who will describe the proposed project and any other further detail. What would you want to add from my comments?
Just introduce myself, Henry Sommerfeld. I'm an attorney from Hodgson Russ. We represent New Energy Equity. A rep from New Energy Equity is here tonight.
Sir, can you come up here?
Sure.
Thank you. Everybody can see that.
That's okay. So Henry Sommerfeld from Hodgson Russ. I'm an attorney that represents New Energy Equity. Jody Hunt is also here from New Energy Equity to address the questions that come up tonight with respect to our request for an IDA pilot and financial assistance with respect to the solar project.
Okay, thank you. Now, a public hearing for public comment at 5:41, sorry. And by opening of the operating rules, I would like to make public comment. Please raise your hand or let me know somehow, and I'll call on you. Please wait to be recognized, and I need to make sure I know names because we are going to have a transcript of this. And please keep your comment at this point to 3 minutes or less, because there's quite a few people, and make sure they have a chance to actually ask any questions. Whenever he has had the opportunity who wants to speak, I'll include the public hearing. A record of the public hearing will be prepared and reviewed by the members of the agency in connection with the agency's consideration of the project, which, as I mentioned, will not be until May. Again, the purpose of the public hearing is to solicit public comment. We're not here to answer questions, although we will attempt to. I will now ask if there's anyone in attendance who wishes to comment on either the nature of the location of the project or the proposed financial assistance being contemplated by the agency. And for the record, as I mentioned, please state your name and indicate your comments on either proposed projects or financial assistance. There we go. I did all my stuff.
Dawn Niedermeyer, resident. So the financial assistance, I just want to reiterate, so
Sure.
you understand this, is for property tax
On the equipment,
on the equipment.
not on the property.
The homeowner, they have a reassessed value, they pay full, because they lose their ag exemption.
Correct.
Um,
So any of the land that where the solar project is located will pay a higher property tax, correct?
so the financial assistance is to the power company.
Yes. Not to McCormick, it has nothing to do with it. Unfortunate, this project, same name as the owner of the land. That's the only project of the 21 we've done where the project has the same name as the landowner.
I think that's where a lot of confusion.
I know that because I didn't realize that until my son even asked me the same question.
I guess the next question is, where is this power going? 'Cause it's not for here. It's for the city, correct?
So what happens is the solar project generates energy, right? Takes the sun, puts it into the grid. It goes into the grid and it's distributed to the grid. It doesn't necessarily go to a specific place. The utility, it goes into the grid for the local utility and it's distributed to those users on the grid. It doesn't go to a specific place necessarily.
So our local substation. And our substation handles that?
No.
No, it's National Grid
National
substation.
Grid.
Yeah, so it goes into the national grid system.
Okay. When these panels are expired, busted, broken, who's responsible for the disposal of this and where do they go?
Yeah, so there's a whole decommissioning plan that is part of the operations of the project. So there's a maintenance requirement for the panels, for the system. They want to check it. They want to make sure it's working. They want to make sure it's working the way it's supposed to. So they do periodic checks. If there is anything wrong with the panel, they'll fix it. And at the useful life, technology improves. But when the project is done, isn't generating power in the same way, they have to remove it and restore the property to the way it was.
I have a quick question. My name is Mark Sisson. Is NextGen a for-profit?
I don't know. This is New Energy Equity.
Oh, New Energy Equity. Okay, so New Energy Equity is the company that's taken ownership of the project.
Correct.
Okay. And how does that differ from McCormick LLC? Like, I don't understand the.
So,
of it.
yeah, so what happens is you have New Energy Equity, that's the developer, and then each project has its own LLC, limited liability company. All of the companies do that because there is one site, there is one project, and that LLC controls the project once it's built.
And if I could get an answer on the first part of the question.
I'm sorry, could you repeat it?
Is this a non-for-profit company or a for-profit company?
This is a for-profit company.
Debbie DeVoe, resident. To get this going, do you have to lease or purchase property elsewhere in the town or village to get it going, or everything's contained right where it is. You don't get to lease property anywhere else to,
No, the space,
oh, it's all right there.
it's all there and they have everything they need. And they're with the utilities, and there's no additional sites relative to that project.
Jerry Vance, I'm a resident. Who determines the output of that thing? Is the pilot, you said $2,500 a kilowatt
Megawatt.
or megawatt? So
It's based upon installation. It's not based upon what actually comes out of it.
So the
Okay.
project nameplate capacity is 4.95 megawatts. That's consistent with the as-built drawings and the way the project was engineered. So based on the space they had to configure the panels in a way that worked based on the space and based on the approvals. These projects generally, what we call community solar, are not over 5 megawatts generally, so this is right under.
well, I just read on the McCormick LLC that it was over 7 megawatts.
No,
That's incorrect. It's 4.95 as
It
built.
should be correct.
Why is it on the internet?
I
think it's your people's information.
It could be, and I don't know what site you're referencing, but there are two ways to refer to megawatts. There's megawatt AC, so alternating current, and then megawatt DC, which is direct current. So it might be that that's a DC reference. Engineers are the folks that talk in DC, but everybody else, including me, we talk in AC, because that's what the utility uses. That's what the pilot refers to.
You know, because there's a big difference between 4.9 and 7.
Yeah, the as-builts are 4.95, Jody has a copy, it's 4.95. You can go over 5 without having to then change things with the utility, so we're not trying to pull a fast one. Without knowing the website, I'm gonna hazard a guess that might be the DC rating.
It produces AC power, and then it gets
Oh, I
converted over to
understand.
AC power, and that's how they rate it.
That ratio sounds about right. It's most likely the DC AC ratio.
I'm not an engineer, so engineers and folks smarter than I am.
Jen Joyce, I'm superintendent of Universal School president. I'm just seeking some clarity on a pilot payment that we received, actually ironically around the same time as this notice came out. It was, I'm not arguing, receiving a check in the mail, but $6,000 for a pilot payment from McCormick LLC.
I can explain that.
Okay,
So,
thank you, because I'm not aware of this.
neither were we, so
Okay.
there was a bit of confusion, and I spoke with Terry Ross, who's the county treasurer. My understanding after we figured that all out, is Dr. Clark and a few other folks were very confused by that payment, as was I, because we wouldn't be here if we had a pilot. So when I spoke with Treasurer Ross, she told me that the county thought we had a pilot. They don't have the executed version, and that's because there is no executed version. But it's their practice that if they're aware of a draft pilot, because sometimes in the scheme of life, they don't get the executed version, they will bill the pilot, even though there was neither an executed version by both jurisdictions and New Energy Equity, and there's no exemption on the roll. You need an exemption to get a pilot. It seemed that they put the cart before the horse, so to speak. We are working through that with the county. We confirmed that there indeed is no pilot. And in fact, the county could only demonstrate an unexecuted, negotiated, a pilot that was in negotiations that the company ended up abandoning in favor of the IDA pilot. So, we expect that that's going to be worked out with the county and with the jurisdiction. I apologize for the confusion.
Okay, well, I haven't, put it in the bank.
They're so good that they pay bills that they get without knowing that they don't get need them.
So the pilot is in May?
Name again?
Dawn Meadway.
Sorry.
So the pilot isn't even in place,
No.
but you said there's a meeting in May?
If we approve it, it'll be in May, yes. There's no pilot currently in place, correct?
So if there's no pilot and they're they are for-profit company, how are they exempt from sales tax and sales tax revenue coming back to the local communities in the county?
Dr. Clark, I feel that.
Okay.
So that was the standard language. So here, this is a bit unorthodox because the project is built, right? It's been permitted, it is built. As a result, they're not seeking a sales tax exemption. I know that's mentioned in the notice, but the project, because it's already built, everything's set, everything's already been purchased. There'll be no sales tax exemption. The exemption is going to be on the equipment, the improvement to the property. If the IDA grants it, it'll be for the 25 years that we asked, and that'll likely occur for the next cycle, given that tentative rules come out in a few weeks on May 1.
So when we head to the pilot, what's the pilot for?
The pilot is for the project itself. So the panels, the equipment, basically all of the infrastructure, not the land.
Not sales tax either.
No.
And not sales tax.
That's
They've already paid that by virtue of purchasing everything already. Generally, when the projects come to the IDA, it's before they're built. The reason why we're at this stage, post-build, post-construction, is in the world of valuation of these projects, it's been a swinging pendulum. There's been a state model, there's been litigation over the model, the state fixed it, there was litigation again, and we've gone back and forth, and companies have had a hard time predicting their tax liabilities over 15, 20, 25-year life cycles. So New Energy came to us last year to kind of figure out what made sense. And it was decided that their financial folks said, we want a longer pilot. We can't tolerate the uncertainty of this swinging pendulum as to how these projects will be valued. So based on that, that's why we're here at this stage asking for a pilot.
Mark Sisson, again, I have another question. So is it customary for the developer to pay the property taxes?
Well, it depends on their lease arrangement. Generally,
I'm sorry.
sorry. Generally, when these projects are looking for a place, they need to find a place that's the right size for the project they're contemplating. So they'll do whatever they do in terms of due diligence and asking around and looking for people who are willing to lease to them. And then they will enter into a lease. I'm not really familiar with the terms of this lease because I didn't negotiate. But generally, there's a value that they pay, and that may or may not cover the underlying land taxes, but that's between them and the landowner. And then they are responsible for whatever liability the project derives, right? Which is why we're seeking the pilot. Because but for the pilot, we would have to pay property taxes on the system. And the pilot is still bringing in funds through a different mechanism.
Jerry, do you have another question?
Yeah, Jerry Vance. Now, I read in this information that this project cost $13 million when it was constructed, and it's assessed at $3 million. And it doesn't seem to me like $2,500 per kilowatt hour is very fair for the taxpayers.
So the $2,500 per megawatt valuation, that's the IDA standard valuation for solar projects. So when you go to the IDA, if they have a solar policy, it's generally $1 per megawatt AC value. That's just how it's done.
$1 per megawatt AC.
AC, correct. Because that's what you go into.
So mostly the $2,500 is on the AC value.
AC, correct.
So
That's the question I
4.95.
asked before. Is it that's what it is, 4.5?
So you take 2,500 times 0.95, it'll give you a dollar value, and that's allocated to each of the jurisdictions based on their pro rata share.
So the pilot's $1,200 or $12,000 a year.
12,005, yeah. The only thing that the IDA does also do, and we do it differently than any other county, is we leave enough money on the table so there's a host agreement that the town and the village also gets money. And that's separate. So typically, that total will be close to $5,000 per megawatt.
I appreciate that point, Dr. Clark. We are closing out post-community agreements negotiations with both the town and the village. I've not been front-facing, but New Energy Equity is in the process of finalizing those with both the town supervisor and the village mayor. So that's additional funds to the localities.
Say what?
I'm not aware of that at all.
Oh, I'm sorry, are you from the town? Okay. You haven't heard from Tim Aarons? Because I've seen emails about,
It's Tim North Molly.
he's in the open area.
talked, but, my understanding was about this pilot program that's going on right now.
It is, but my point to the gentleman's question was, Tim has raised and presented, I have, the host community agreements with the valuation proposed, and his, indication to me was those are gonna go through and get approved.
Yeah, we haven't had any really discussion on anything.
That's not my understanding.
That's
Jody?
not my understanding either. I've got the drafts right here, so we'll make sure that send those together. No, they're not signed yet. They're in draft.
Right, to be clear, I never said that they were fully executed. We're in negotiation. New Energy has been heading that up. Obviously, maybe the attorney has to get involved and close that out, but there are draft agreements and they've been with the jurisdictions as far as I know. Jody has copies of them. But regardless of where we are in that process, New Energy Equity has proposed those agreements and we'll get them closed out. The IDA does look for that.
Is there anything else? If the pilots.
Can I have your name, sir?
Is there anything else?
Cindy Vance, I didn't hear you, I apologize.
You heard me?
I did now.
When the pilot's approved, is that the date it goes forward for the payments, or does it get backdated from when the project started?
It won't get backdated. It'll be a forward-looking agreement with a due date. When it's signed and approved.
When it's agreed.
If it is.
And we will, just so everyone knows, the IDA will not agree to a pilot unless the town and village already have a host agreement.
Debbie Dibble, this is just a simple question. If you go to we were all recently reassessed. If you go to the county website, the McCormick company, the part in the village is reassessed for $1.7 million. And their town and county is like 29,000 for the village, and then another 30 for the town portion. So that is the amount of money that you don't want to pay, right?
Well,
That 29 and then 30
so I don't know how the assessor valued the project.
as a solar farm.
Right, but I don't know what value's been attributed to that. So it's not that we don't want to pay it, it's
So
that,
that is what this is kind of what this is, so you don't want to pay those property tax.
this would be in lieu of property taxes, if that's your question. So if we didn't go the IDA route and we would negotiate pilots with the individual jurisdictions, which we could do, they'd be shorter pilots, we would still be paying something other than taxes. The reason we're going to the IDA is the IDA offers a longer pilot. We're asking for 25 years. So either way.
So what happens when the village is trying to do their budget and they get an amount, okay, this is what you have to work with from property taxes, but then 30 grand you have to wait from them because it's in negotiation and they're planning on that money.
So just like any pilot, the jurisdictions will know if we enter into a pilot, and then they'll get notice of it, and the assessor will move the project to the exempt portion of the roll, and then they'll account for the pilot payment and any other financial monies that are received. I mean, this isn't the first time. the
No,
jurisdictions
they
dealt with
have
this.
to make their budget well before,
Right.
with those amounts. Okay.
Superintendent?
I know you talked about the host agreement, and I know that the school district doesn't have, a say in the pilot matter, but I know education contribution agreements exist. Is that something that would be considered for Andover?
I could take that back. Generally, the ECA happens in the context of 487 pilots, which is the shorter pilot,
Sure,
but we can certainly take
because,
that back.
yeah, it impacts us as well, not just the village and the town. Thank you.
I had a question.
Yeah,
David,
sure.
Mayor. How long is the lease on the property for this?
Jody, do you know?
You know what, I don't have a copy of the lease with me. I can get you a copy of the lease, or it's part of the public
Do you
file.
know how long it is? Look,
I don't know.
I
Generally,
thought it was 20 years.
Generally, you want a lease that goes typically for the life of the project, which 20 to 25 years, and then there might be options.
So why would you, if it is 20, which I think it is, I could be wrong, you're asking for a pilot program longer than what the lease is.
There are usually options.
There's usually a
for this
5-year
longer.
That's what you're asking for is longer than what the lease is, not the options you're asking for.
I will get a copy of the lease, but I don't want to speak to how long the lease is without knowing.
Yeah, I mean, generally, we're
I
not,
don't think a pilot program should be longer than the lease.
well, if the lease expires, there won't be any project to give an exemption to. So, naturally, we want to ask for a pilot that covers the extent and life of the project. If we don't have a lease to cover that, there'd be no pilot.
So what happens to that then? Do you still proceed? If this isn't approved,
If the idea doesn't
does
start
not
the
approve
pilot,
what you're requesting, what happens?
we go back to the drawing board.
If I could just make an observation and seek a little clarity. I think where the community's struggling is we're potentially losing $2.something million in taxes over the next 25 years to aid a for-profit company that's in turn doing nothing to better our community. So I was wondering if you could just offer a little insight as to how a for-profit corporation should receive this aid on our expenses.
Well, let me speak first to the for-profit non. Most companies are for-profit. Most entities that come and seek some type of relief, be it from the IDA or through a pilot, are for-profit companies. They are businesses. It's not typical that a not-for-profit would seek the relief. Why? Because nonprofits that own property have an exemption under our PTL 420A.
What was that last sentence? I'm sorry.
Nonprofits that own property generally have a property tax exemption for 100% of their taxes. That's under section 420-A of the real property tax law.
But you are a for-profit company.
They are a for-profit.
You represent them.
Correct.
So again, how does it make sense to logically, at the taxpayer's expense, assist financially a profitable for-profit corporation that's making money off of all this? I just don't
Well, because
understand
they're bringing money into the community by way of the property existing there. Otherwise, if that project weren't there, you'd still have partially exempt ag land.
And what money is coming into the community?
Well, the HCA payments and the pilot payments that'll be distributed by the IDA.
$250,000, $300,000 over the next 25 years as opposed to $2.1 million, or whatever.
I-
it is.
I don't have my
Where did that
spreadsheet in front of me, but,
$2.1 million.
I'm kind of surprised you guys don't have the actual numbers that we would help you receive.
we don't because the IDA, it's the IDA's pilot. So we can look numbers, generally there's a 2% escalator. We can tell you what each of you would generally get, but I'm often reluctant to do that in public meetings because then those numbers get ingrained in people's minds and, tax rates change. So, we have an estimate. The bottom line is, to go back to your question, we're after this incentive so that the project can actually work economically. And we have two options. We could do it through the IDA, which is what we prefer, and there would be an alternative option. That alternative option is a much shorter option and it wouldn't offer the same benefit. But we're still bringing money into the community that wouldn't be there otherwise.
Could you bring in a playground or something?
I missed that. What's that?
Playground or something to give it,
Well, once the HCA's are negotiated,
something that will benefit.
the town and the village, once those HCA's, the host community agreement payments are made, they're free to use that money for whatever they wish. That's up to them. They have full discretion, based on the agreement. So you're getting additional money for whatever the town and village really wants to use. I think there was a question over here. Did you have a question there?
I think, honestly,
Mark?
pretty much
I just want to understand this so bad. So there's a difference between the pilot agreement and a host agreement.
Correct. Two different agreements.
So IDA is the pilot,
Correct.
host would be town and village.
And let's be clear, the pilot is through the IDA. The IDA is then going to distribute a chunk of that pilot to 4 places: the town, the village, the county, and the school. And then on top of that, you have the host community agreement to the town and to the village.
But where is it gonna go? Does it have to be allocated in a certain fund at those certain government entities, or can it go to the general fund?
So the pilot comes in and will be budgeted for. The HCA's will be budgeted for, but my understanding is they can be unrestricted in terms of their use.
Okay.
That's my understanding. I'm not the treasurer, I'm not the assessor, I'm not an elected official, but in negotiating these for as many years as I have been, that's why people like those agreements.
Yeah, Patrick Cullen, resident. And how many of these solar farms around the state? I've seen hundreds of them built in my job. How many are 100% successful, and who are they successful for? Certainly not the villages.
Well, two points to that. First is, most are very successful, and I'll tell you that there's a good chunk of it is in the renewable energy field. So I wouldn't be able to keep doing this, people wouldn't keep hiring me if it wasn't successful. And I have projects across the state, I have projects in Orange County, all the way up northwest. You pick it, I've probably been I avoid New York City because they don't have solar, there's no space for it. We all avoid New York City. Right? To the second point, who benefits from it? My position, as it was in Mark's question, is believe it or not, everybody benefits. There's a few benefits. We talked about the financial benefits, right? Money is coming in. It can be in the form of a pilot. It could be in the form of the HCA. Some of them are paying in different ways, right? However you cut the cake, there's going to be money that otherwise wasn't there. Why? Because that land that's being used was most likely some type of vacant or ag land. So now it's going to be valued differently, and it's going to be paying more than what it was.
But one more question. You mentioned negotiations. Who do those negotiations take place between, as far as the
HCAs.
Yeah.
So generally, I'm negotiating the HCAs because New Energy Equity hired us sort of midstream last year. Those were already being proposed by the folks at New Energy Equity, front-facing with the elected officials.
And you're negotiating with who?
They're negotiating with the town and the village. So the village mayor, the town supervisor, or their respective attorneys.
And those negotiations have been taking place and.
We have, I know we seem to, there is some disconnect, it seems, as the mayor indicated, but I've gotten emails, and I don't want to put Dr. Clark on the spot, but I thought the IDA had also discussed this as far as the HCAs. We have drafted agreements. I think one might even be partially executed. I don't know if that's the town or the village. Maybe it was during a change in the board. I don't know because I wasn't involved. What I can tell you is I have two agreements that have been proposed, and my client tells me I've been discussing these with the jurisdictions. And some clients like to negotiate those themselves. Again, because I came in midstream, they felt that bringing me into those negotiations may not help. They're like, look, it's already at the goal line. Let's not complicate it. And I'm sure they probably didn't want to have to,
So
take those
my
steps.
concern is, I'll speak to Dave, is, we got supposedly negotiated contracts and our mayor is unaware of any of this. And furthermore, who's negotiating on the town's behalf?
This is the town proposed HCA, and it was Gus Weber, the supervisor.
He stepped down.
Well, it's not uncommon that elected officials phase in and phase out, but that's who the discussions happened with. Tim Aarons from New Energy Equity, who was negotiating those, is in Albany and couldn't be here tonight. But I'm certainly gonna go back to him and say, there seems to be some disconnect, and maybe I got to step in and get it over the goal line, but I have two draft agreements that I've seen.
And then lastly, who would negotiate on behalf of the school district?
Any negotiation with the school district would be with the superintendent and their council, or some designee. Sometimes it might be the assistant superintendent.
I respectfully feel like there's a lot of disconnects.
Yes.
I'm the president of the school board, this is the first I've heard about it.
Well, we haven't had any front-facing negotiations with the school. That's probably why. That's, generally the other benefit of going to the IDA is you're dealing with one entity and everybody else gets a chunk of the pie. So it eliminates having to speak with here 4 jurisdictions.
Does the village have a lawyer?
No, we have an attorney.
Should he be present to listen in on the negotiations and on the behalf of the village board?
He'll be involved, yes, but this wasn't this was the pilot, was my understanding. I thought everything else was wrapped up with the pilot, because the county had my understanding of all of this.
But the pilot is the debate.
I'm talking about
In lieu of
the
paying
agreement
taxes.
itself. I thought that the pilot was all together, the host agreement. I didn't realize the host agreement is separate from the pilot.
Some
I'm looking right
IDAs.
now at my emails, I do have, there's nothing signed.
Right, I never represented it as signed, that's why I said we're still in negotiation, because I'm still waiting on the signed copy myself. Superintendent?
So I just want to share that I was involved in some initial discussions before the IDA was involved. And I'm just questioning if, so that I have a draft ECA, and then the school kind of got kicked out when the IDA got involved. So I'm wondering if that's what happened with the town and the village. Those drafts were, conversations were taking place before the IDA was involved. I have a draft myself, and then now we're kind of,
To be completely frank, Superintendent, that may well be possible. Again, I'm not throwing anybody under the bus. I came in, I know that they were exploring and contemplating one avenue, and then when we got involved, we talked them through kind of how it all games out. And they said, well, if we can get a longer pilot through the IDA, that's what we want to do. So I think there was some start and stop, and, you know, I don't know that it was all clarified as far as the direction they were going.
To answer your question, yes, we were in negotiations with the first company.
Directly,
that
yep.
approached us.
We were too.
I forgot who that was.
3 years.
Oh, it was
And then-
in
It was a
20,
long time.
But
2020.
then,
Yeah,
in the meantime, the county, running across the county, stepped in, said they're gonna handle it. Gus has resigned since then, so he's really not here to defend the village of what was happening at that time.
And
yeah.
that's,
The pass off,
yes, is from the first.
I think it would have been the first round.
it could have been, and the pass off definitely doesn't help when there's a change in, you know, the players of the game. So I appreciate that point there. Sir?
Yes, Steve Martelli, Supervisor, Town of Andover. I have no copy of any HCA at all. I don't know what's stated in it. I came in after Gus, so kind of trying to catch up. So if you could forward me a copy of that email somehow.
This goes back to 2021, just for reference.
Okay.
So I'll see. And I think, have you heard from Tim? I've asked him to reach out.
I spoke to Tim several times. We've had a disconnect a couple of times.
I think I'm gonna step
back and forth.
I think that, you know, a lot of times, my point to Tim was I didn't want either jurisdiction to necessarily get spooked, right? Because sometimes I reach out and I see a lawyer, and it's not that at all, and it shouldn't be. But sometimes everybody wants to negotiate their own agreement, right? Either side wants to pay the lawyer, also get that. I'm gonna go back to Tim, and then maybe it makes sense that I just kind of facilitate those now.
Okay, you said that these were partial agreements that you said you had. Do you have one partial agreement with the town, or is that?
That's, yes,
Signed
my
by
understanding, but yeah,
Okay.
former supervisor.
All right, if you could get me a copy of that.
Sure can.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
My question is, I'm Jim Congello, Highway Superintendent. How can you go off by a signed agreement from Gus, from the old, the first owners?
So there would be, so it would be binding on both. At the time, that supervisor had authority to enter into the agreement, it's binding as to them. The other company would be binding as to the LLC, which was then purchased. So you take it, everything with it.
And from what I understand, that agreement wasn't signed by the LLC, was it?
It's partially, only the town.
Right, that's right.
And the reason why it wasn't fully executed, again, with the pass off and then with the change in the supervisor, everybody was kind of like, what are we doing?
Sure.
So I don't think there's gonna be any hesitation on their part. I think, again, it's just a conversation of, here's what was done, are we all good with this?
Okay.
Where are we going from here? So,
So my next question to you, we talked about the host agreement between the village and town. The county has no part of that.
correct.
For some reason, I don't believe that, because when it comes to money, the county's always has their hands in it.
No,
So we go ahead and sign this for the host agreement, next thing they come back and say, oh, no, we're getting a portion of it.
this is Craig Clark. I can tell you, we've done 21 of these, and it's never happened.
Okay.
Host agreements are host agreements, and the county has nothing to say about this.
And just to Dr. Clark's point in your question, Jeff, that's because, yes, we're in the county, the town and the village are in the county, but when it's in the confines of the town and the village, you're the ones that are the legitimate host. You were the ones that permitted the project, you were the ones that went through all of that process. So, yeah, the county doesn't step.
Was there ever building permit issued by the town for the project?
I would have to think so.
You should see if you can find it.
The building permit?
Yeah, you have a building permit from the town, you have it from the village, but did the town ever issue one?
Yes, we
You
did.
guys did issue it, it's customary today, you guys did issue it.
Yeah, I don't know very much money, but yeah.
So I have a question or a statement, Cindy.
Sure.
If the pilot is to entice companies to come in and develop in our area, they're already here. Why So why would we want to do a pilot? Isn't it beneficial for us to not do a pilot? They're
Well-
already here.
We're here, they're here and they want to stay.
Well, you're not gonna tear it up and go, are you?
Well, not necessarily, right? But it becomes financially a question of, is this sustainable under the current regime? And I mentioned, I think at the beginning of this, the valuation of these projects has been pendulum swinging. And the state, though wanting these projects, has for some reason not really made a lot of headway clarifying for the localities how to value them. So you can imagine the uncertainty. If you have a project that has 25-year lifespan, you know your taxes in year one maybe, but what happens 2 through 25? That's why the pilot is so important. It gives that certainty to everybody, right? Because once the state comes in, I mean, we've seen valuation models where the value's high and then the value's low. So it's not just, sure, it's beneficial to the company, but it's beneficial to the jurisdictions for their budgeting so that they know, here's the dollars in the door. This is going to stay steady.
Tax revenue is really beneficial to us.
Pardon me?
And that big tax payment's really beneficial to a rural
Yeah, there's
area.
no benefits to this. You know what would be a benefit? The county would give existing businesses a pilot program. That would be a benefit to all of us. People that have
But it wouldn't be,
employees.
it wouldn't be beneficial for us to not have a pilot?
I don't think it would be. It's beneficial to them, not us.
No, to not have a pilot. It would be beneficial for us to not have a
Right, so
pilot.
we get full
Right,
market
that's what
value.
I'm saying. They're already here, so why have a pilot?
Let me speak to that again, just because I think it's an important distinction. Really, the question comes down to a 15-year pilot with each jurisdiction, which we would have the opportunity potentially to negotiate, or a 25-year pilot. So I think the idea of whether or not it's going to go full taxes is not on the table. It's just a question of which route we're going to go for the pilot.
I got a question, but she's got one back there.
So I want to know the bottom line, how is this lost revenue through the pilot of the property tax going to affect our property tax?
I can't tell you that because I'm not the assessor.
So, right. so
And
there's the
I
big
don't work
question.
for the town.
Property taxes are high right now, so there's the big question mark in the air.
Well, again, but the pilot, understand something, it's not like it's getting an exemption and not paying anything, right? This is an IDA pilot, it's a standard pilot, the IDA does this for their projects, right? That they have to do, and then there's an extra financial agreement by way of the
Who didn't ask for this?
Well, I understand you didn't ask for it, but, you know, they got permitted, it's allowed to be there.
The project is already here, that's what I'm, explain that to me. It's already here, we're not enticing this company in with.
This is Craig. This is the first of 21 projects that we've had to come in afterwards. And it's unfortunate that they didn't come to us to start with. That's all I can say. I mean, the incentives are there and it makes it work long-term, like you've mentioned, makes it viable. And one way or another, is a pilot through us or some other kind of negotiated pilot. That's all I'm telling you. I mean, and clean energy, whether or not you like it or not, it is here, and I think it's working in the state. Yes.
Ryan Black, so I've got a question, couple questions, comments, statements. So I always thought, as a county resident, the purpose of a pilot program was for the larger companies that are going to generate revenue directly to the county, communities, or et cetera, and create additional jobs. Has this solar project done any of those?
Well, so solar projects aren't a huge employment generator, right? They're just not. But you do have the construction phase where you're gonna have people, and then there's gonna be, I think, a part-time manager who's gonna manage the project. But look, I'm not gonna stand here and tell you you're gonna get 100 jobs. It's just not, it's not gonna happen.
There are any local jobs.
So the purpose of this, I'm understanding through all the questions, is they're looking for an property is X, and now that the equipment's added, it would be Y. This pilot program is an exemption to just keep the property tax as it was, as vacant land, as opposed to what it's worth now with the equipment on.
No, so the land is gonna be valued separately, and it will not be exempt. So they're gonna pay land taxes, or whatever the lease arrangement is.
Based on the land without any of the equipment on it, right?
No, based on however the assessor assesses the land in its current condition. So the project's there, the assessor's gonna value that however he or she values it. Then the pilot is for the equipment, it's for the solar project. It panels, the inverter, the wrapping, all of that.
The value of that,
The improvement, the value.
the taxable value of that equipment. So essentially, as a municipality, we would only be looking to seek tax revenue based off the vacant land prior to any of the equipment added, correct?
Well, again, no, I mean, the value is gonna be the project, the land is gonna be valued separately with the project, because the value of it is no longer ag. It's gonna be valued at.
I understand you're trying to get the difference between the ag exemption that it had prior to the addition of the equipment and the property value without it. So this pilot program is looking to negate the increase in the value of that property with said equipment which has been added.
Correct, and that would be the case whether we go through the IDA or we go the standard real property tax law.
So the only advantage to the village is from a tax revenue and the town from a tax revenue basis is the minus the ag exemption, what the property's valued at without that, correct?
Well, not entirely, because there'll still be special district taxes that are paid, so fire company taxes are paid full vote. Whatever the pilot share is, plus the HCA. Equivalent to full taxes, no, but it's not zero.
Mark again. So you mentioned that some of the agreements have already been signed. The town,
The town's been partially, the host community agreement we're talking about, right?
Okay, so you got the host and then you got the pilot.
Right.
So what happens in the scenario that none of them get signed? Like, what if we can't come to terms or agree with it? Does the project still go forward? Or is that host separate from the pilot?
It is separate. It is separate. So in theory, if the IDA approves this pilot at its next meeting in May, the pilot's done. Then we're left with the HCA's, and then we have to negotiate those. And look, I expect that those are gonna work themselves out.
Understood. So back to the two scenarios, a pilot, that would be, the county, the idea.
Yeah,
And that determination will be made from a group that sits at a board meeting based on all the feedback, everything we're getting. Most likely, that's probably gonna be approved regardless of the feelings of the community. Is that a safe assumption?
No, we listed everything. I mean, we have not made any predeterminations.
Okay. So once that's been established, the pilot goes forward, the project goes forward. At that point, you negotiate the best you can with the other half, right?
When you say the other half, Mark,
That each.
Yes.
Well, this is the IDA again. I will mention one last time, we will not execute a pilot until an HOA is in place.
Okay, thank you. That's important.
No, I'm just telling you, and we have never done that.
The
In
last
20,
statement-
in 21 other projects, we've always made it very clear, we will not negotiate or finalize a pilot until the village and the
Of
town.
the 20 or 21 projects that you
Yeah.
guys have done, have you taken into consideration the amount of profit that this company is making and their ability to pay the taxes to the community?
Through an audit, no.
Wow, good idea.
Generally, I mean, I won't speak for the IDA, but generally, that's not a measure of pilots. Why?
Right.
Because ultimately, if they were paying taxes, you wouldn't be able to do that either. It's just not a real property, authority or power. You pay your taxes, you pay your pilot, and pilots are treated similarly.
But I run a business. If I had central air conditioning to my office, my taxes go up. I don't understand the difference between a for-profit power company and why they're getting breaks. We're not. I don't understand that.
Well, we have the opportunity to go see the pilot. It's provided for by the law. That's why we're allowed to do it.
I got a question.
Name?
Mark Rowley.
Okay, thank you.
I'm an observer. I got a couple questions for you, Dr. Smith.
Clark.
Dr. Clark. In your original.
Although I'll try Mr. Smith.
Mr. Smith. In your original posting, you sit here and state that the project consisting of the following: A, acquisition of interest.
Right.
And you give, excuse me, an approximate 22 acre portion of approximately 141.30 acres.
Right.
And then you go on to say land located at 18 Chestnut Street. And you go ahead and you give the tax map number. And then again at 1302 Chestnut Street, tax map number, and you give that tax map number. Where'd you get that information from?
The wrong information?
No, where did you get the information from?
When it was looked up, they made a typo and they looked up the wrong tax map number first one. That's why we reposted it.
You reposted it?
Yeah.
Now I got a question for you. When there's 141.3 acres, is actually 2 parcels. Don't you think you should have listed the tax map number for those?
I'll go back and look.
You can have this copy.
Sure.
I posted, actually, I'll give you this copy.
Sure.
I actually went ahead and pulled these off this morning off the website for Allegheny County. Now I have another question. If you look at the third item down, which is on this paper here, it says this has 24.80 acres. It also says it's the family irrevocable trust. Has that been rectified, or how has that been addressed? A trust.
Right.
How does that play into?
That's not our problem. That's with the actual, when they lease, they make a lease. We didn't do the lease.
So what kind of liability does the IDA have with that? If there's something comes back and they want to reclaim that land, or they get sued? Or if there's a liability posted against that from some failure at the plant? How does that work?
I'll verify. I do not know that. I mean, they have to have full insurance on that. I can tell you that.
So if you take these 2 parcels, which you only listed one map reference,
Okay.
when you add them together, they come up to 141.3 acres.
Okay.
It seems to me that you should have posted in your listing,
I know.
yeah, both tax
I
map
hear.
numbers.
Was the company aware of the irrevocable trust?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Was the company aware of the irrevocable trust on the parcel?
Is it the McCormick Irrevocable Trust?
One of the
One of the parcels.
One of the
That's just the property owner.
It doesn't mean that it's the lease. I don't know.
Yeah, it just means if that is the case, that just means the property is in trust.
Right.
It's just the way, the legal nature in which it owns the property. Doesn't affect anything.
But my point was, it wasn't listed in the posting as 2 separate parcels.
We'll have to take a look.
I'll have to ask Nadine why she didn't dispose of them.
The other one is this one at 18 Chestnut Street. And what I find ironic about that, which is in your posting,
The original posting, was wrong. We posted another posting.
okay, so was the 18 Chestnut Street removed?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the second posting, which I read from, does not have the 18 Chestnut. That was a mistake.
So I got a question. So who chooses the vendor to do who chooses the solar vendor to build on land? In New York State, NYSERDA has a vendor list.
The company selects its contractor.
The company being McCormick's.
No, meaning the LLC.
The McCormick LLC.
No, you said the McCormick's, let's be clear.
That's
It's
why I
the
said the
McCormick
McCormick
LLC.
LLC.
I misheard you then, I thought you said
I-
McCormick's. Let's just say the LLC, because
The
I don't want
LLC.
people to think that the
Okay.
landowners are building the project. They're not.
No, the LLC chooses the vendor, right? So the original vendor was Clean Choice, correct?
The
I
original
don't-
developer for the project that was permitting the project, handling just the permitting, was Clean Choice. That was bought by New Energy Equity from Clean Choice. Clean Choice did not develop or build the project. New Energy Equity, through the LLC,
Okay,
built the project.
okay. Because that's the only reason I asked that is because if Clean Choice filed bankruptcy or they went out of business, which they didn't.
They have not, no.
Right, but when you go to their website, they don't post this as one of their projects.
Because it doesn't, that's not, we own it.
You own it now,
That's correct.
okay.
Question over here.
Do you have other,
Who's speaking? I can't see.
oh, it's Stephanie. Do you
Okay.
have other solar, companies, solar sites or in addition, having this in addition to?
We have several solar projects.
yeah, throughout the Northeast, throughout New York, throughout the Midwest. If you're interested in seeing some, yeah, I can get you that information. Sure.
And I kind of wish that the assessor was here, because there was a question asked earlier about your company paying lease payments to Mr. McCormick. Did I understand that correctly? Like you're leasing from his land.
We lease his land from him to have our solar project there. And I am not, I don't know anything about that lease agreement. I have to be fully transparent with you. I'm an environmental scientist. I do environmental work on these projects. Finances, that's all that. That's all Henry, I am.
I would just say that probably, I would guess the assessor would consider that land is not just plain land. Assessment is straight $1,200 an acre, which is what they assess property at right now in the town. I would say that you probably would consider the fact that there's lease on them, but that's just a guess. I wish he was here to answer that. Can't help.
Are there any other questions on the financial assistance that we're trying to? Thank you.
Dominic Mayor, this is to the village board. Are you going to let future solar projects come in?
That's a discussion outside of this meeting.
Okay.
What are the next steps?
Well, after all, everyone has their opportunity to ask questions or speak. Dr. Clark will close this public hearing. I'll go back to New Energy Equity. It seems like I have a few action items to address with the local jurisdictions, and the idea will be next month to do whatever it might do at that meeting regarding this application.
Just say one more question, Cindy.
Thank you, Cindy.
It's not operational, am I correct?
You are correct, it's not currently operational.
Anytime in the near future, it's been sitting there for 2 years.
God willing.
Yeah, there's a whole list and process that involves the state and the utility, and it largely is out of our control. I'm sure if it could have been done, they would want it to be operational.
I'm sure.
National Grid just ran the lines over to the transmission lines, so it'll probably be operational fairly soon.
Yeah, we are projecting by the end of July, we will be up and running.
One of the reasons why it's not operational is National Grid had an issue on their end. It should have been up and operational about 6 months ago. So they had to wait for National Grid to get the.
Yeah, but shouldn't they have all been thought out?
Oh, it's all thought about. I guarantee it's all thought about. I built one of these over the summer, that's why I know
Right.
about these things.
Right.
It was thought about, but when somebody like National Grid drops the ball, and then one of the things also, I think you can verify this, emergencies takes precedence over anything else, so to put anything that's on schedule is delay. So, you know, that's why it's been pushed out so far.
Just curious.
Yeah.
One last question.
AJ Niemeyer. So, you might have to repeat.
That's okay.
But, unless there's an agreement with the local municipalities, the school, the town, and the village, you guys can't do anything.
That's our policy. We can, but that's our policy.
So with that said, the next course of action would be to reach out to the mayor, the superintendent, possibly Jen and or myself, to continue negotiations on the HOC.
HCA. Yeah, I gotta go back I gotta go, yeah, it is a little different, but we won't confuse them with nomenclature. It is confusing the concepts, because everything has a different name. But the financial agreements with the locales, I'm gonna go back to New Energy Equity. Tim is the point person, so I gotta talk to him first. We'll get aligned about what happened tonight. I'm gonna tell him, I think it's a good idea that I, speak with their respective heads of the jurisdictions and help move this forward.
I got a question.
Name?
Mark Roberts.
Okay, thank you.
When the town loses power, does the solar farm stay operational or not?
I don't think so, because it's still interconnected to the grid.
No,
so it's
you're
not-
correct, it does not.
Right.
There's no.
I'm not an electrical engineer, so I just play one on TV.
So So just let everybody know is if there's a power outage, that solar farm has to be disconnected and it's usually done automatically
Fair fail-safes.
or remotely. So the town's not gonna get anything from that solar farm when the sun's shining and there's no power.
Yeah.
Also, to clarify another point I heard earlier, that may be connected to the grid, but what is the grid? So the grid is divided into transmission and is into distribution. The distribution side is what everybody's house gets fed on in the village. The transmission side is what gets delivered from Wellsville to here. That energy from that solar farm does not go back into the transmission grid because it can't. It only stays locally on the grid serving the town and the village, whatever that electrical grid is tied to, out in the country, wherever it's going. So I just want to make that point perfectly clear.
Thank you. I don't know the locale well enough to say this is the perimeter. I just say it goes back to the grid because.
Well, I think that's completely outside of this whole process
Yeah.
in this public hearing, really, the task at hand is the pilot program.
Right.
We've already been here for an hour, we have another meeting to be
I'm
done,
done.
so we really
Yeah.
need to get this moving.
Yeah, I think that's why I was saying there's probably got all the financial assistance questions I think we've heard and
Can I have a short one?
half of one, Jerry.
Okay. This is for the agency.
Yeah.
Your $2,500 per megawatt, it only goes up 2% a year.
Right.
I think that could be increased a little bit. That's where the agency could help us a little bit. 2% a year, I mean, I know we don't know what inflation is, but it's been like 25% the last 3 years.
What percentage does Andover, the village of Andover get? What percentage does the town of Andover get, the school, and also the county? Is it all equal portion?
It's all based, no, it's all based on tax rates. Other than that, I think we'd like to close if I could. Yeah, thank you, Chair. If we could, I want to thank everybody for being here and asking the questions, but I think we've gotten most of the financial assistance questions out there and hopefully answered. There'll be a transcript of this as well posted. And we'll close the public hearing at 6:38. And I want to thank the village board for letting us take over. They're going to get home late now because they didn't get to start their meeting on time. Thank you.
Good luck on your retirement. It's great.
You like it, huh? Best job you ever had.